The 73rd session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay will lead the chamber in prayer.
Panginoon, ngayong malapit na ang panahon ng Kwaresma, buksan mo po ang aming mga puso at isipan upang maiwaksi ang galit at puot laban sa aming mga kapwa. We know that temptations abound us, and with your help and guidance, love and righteousness will prevail. Guide us back to your loving arms, our God of love. Ituro mo po sa amin ang inyong banal na karunungan upang maging gabay namin sa isang marangal at kapita-pitagang buhay. Fill our hearts with peace and justice instead, so we can share it with our fellow men and women. Give our minds clarity, so we can serve our countrymen faithfully as leaders of the land, and formulate programs, policies, and service that would uplift their lives from the poverty and prejudice that surrounds us. Bigyan mo kami ng tapang at tibay ng loob upang mapagtagumpayan ang mga hamon at unos ng buhay. Guide our hands and feet so that we can be your tools in spreading your goodness and generosity to all of your creation. Pagkalooban po ninyo kami ng sapat na kakayahan upang patuloy naming mapagsilbihan ang bawat Pilipinong umaasa sa amin. Patnubayan mo po kami, Panginoon, at dalangin namin sa inyo ang kabutihan ng aming kapwa at bayan. Siya nawa.
Thank you, Senator Binay. The Senate choir will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem. The Secretary may please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Poe, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberis, Senate President Pimentel.
With 17 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 72nd session, Wednesday, March 8, 2017, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, before we proceed with the reference of business, well, first, I'd like to acknowledge guests of the Senate in the gallery today. We have the guests of Senator Grace Poe, Attorney Coy Casado, board member of Benguet, Emo Bimomia, board member of Ifugao, Randolph Awisan, board member of Mountain Province, and John Operio of Kalinga. Also, we'd like to acknowledge the student representatives from the University of the Philippines, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Eulogio Amang Rodriguez Institute of Science and Technology, Technological University of the Philippines, Rizal Technological University, the Philippine State College of Aeronautics, Marikina Polytechnic College, the UP System Bukluran, the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, Akbayan Youth, and Department of Information and Communications Technology representatives, guests of Senator Bam Aquino, and guests of Senator Gatchalian, the Municipal Mayor Hermógenes Cordova of Leon Postigo, Zamboanga del Norte, and the councilors of Leon Postigo, led by Vice Mayor Aida Ros Hambali, and the students and family members of Don Carlo Cabina School, Las Piñas, and guests of Senator Trillanes, Solicitor General Jesusa Magbanwa. We'd like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, before the reference of business, we'd like to avail of the presence of the members of the Senate. So may we ask the members to give an ear to the third reading bills. I move to consider for third reading House Bill 4631 under Committee Report number 36.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we request Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Republic Broadcasting System Incorporated, presently known as the GMA Network Incorporated, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 7252, entitled An Act Granting the Republic Broadcasting System, Inc. A franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations in the Philippines.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 7, 2017, thereby complying with the 3-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading, House Bill 4631.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. The Secretary will call the roll
For nominal voting.
for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Delon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Suveri, Senate President Pepente.
There being 17 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstention, House Bill number 4631 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, I move to consider for third reading House Bill 4637 under Committee Report
Majority
number
Leader,
43.
before that, may we have a minute suspension?
1 minute suspension, Mr. President. Saan yan? Mamaya?
Do I wait for everything to finish?
Yeah, oo. Pag naka-announce na, explain niyo po.
Pati yung ibang bills,
Oo.
right after higher ed.
Hindi. Pwedeng after the bill itself. Mr. President, I move to consider for third reading. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Dito sa... Tapos yung dito sa ano? Interpolation. Sa smart?
Hindi, sa Wi-Fi
Sa mamaya
di ba?
pa. Di ba na? Smart muna to.
Smart muna.
Mr. President, I move to consider for third reading House Bill 4637 under Committee Report number 43.
Any objection? Hearing none.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act extending for 25 years the franchise granted to Smart Communications, Inc., formerly Smart Information Technologies, Inc., amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 7294, entitled An Act Granting Smart Information Technologies, Inc., a franchise to establish, install, maintain, lease, and operate integrated telecommunications, computer, electronic services, and stations throughout the Philippines for public, domestic, and international telecommunications and for other purposes.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 9, 2017, thereby complying with the 3-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading, House Bill 4637.
Any objection? Hearing none,
May we ask Secretary for a
Secretary
roll
will
call
call the
vote?
roll for a roll
Yes,
call
thank you.
vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 16 affirmative votes, 1 negative vote, 0 abstention, House Bill number 4637 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 209 under Committee Report Number 30. Mr. President, before my motion, may we recognize Senator Hontiveros to explain her vote.
Senator Risa Hontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and Majority Leader. Mr. President, last Tuesday, during the period of amendments for the renewal of franchise of Smart Telecoms, I proposed amendments which I thought were necessary to ensure that Smart complies with its obligations to its subscribers and prevent the perpetuation of a duopoly that compromises the quality of telecommunication services in the country. In a sense, this sends a clear signal that the grant of a franchise is indeed a privilege that carries not only rights but also obligations. These amendments were unfortunately not accepted by the good sponsor. But we should stand on the side of the people who have so long suffered from poor telecom service but had no choice but to stick with their current service providers simply because there is no alternative. I'm therefore registering my no vote to the grant of franchise extension to Smart. And if I may be further allowed to explain my vote, please let me state the following issues which I thought were and still are crucial. First, the 30% public listing requirement. Considering that Smart has continuously failed to comply with this requirement, we need a mechanism to guarantee compliance. In this case, what we propose is that the franchise be ipso facto revoked should Smart fail to list within 2 years. Why provide a penalty? This penalty for a violation of the transfer limitation provision, but fail to do so for this one. Second, equality clause. As admitted by the sponsor during the interpellation, this clause is redundant as it is already contained in RE number 7295, the Telecommunications Act. Third, tax exemptions. Does an entrenched member of a duopoly need these privileges? It does not. Of particular concern is the substitution of the value-added tax for the 3% franchise tax. Given the nature of the VAT, this is a tax that can and will be passed directly to consumers, possibly making service that is already among the slowest and most expensive in the region even more expensive. Congress should also consider any additional exemptions and privileges very carefully. The equality clause in RA number 7925 will, in conjunction with the equality clause, make these exemptions and privileges applicable to all other telecom franchise holders, including those already owned by Smart and Globe. This might lead to unintended consequences, particularly when the scope of the equality clause is ambiguous. As we all learned last week, there is a possibility that provisions in the franchise of the National Grid Corporation may be made applicable to entities in the telecommunications industry. These unintended consequences may end up further solidifying the market position of the duopolists. Fourth, reallocation of the radio spectrum. Moreover, it should be noted that both Smart and Globe have previously moved in tandem to oppose the entry of a third player in the industry. Between them, they have now been assigned all of the relevant portions of the radio spectrum. Does SMART need SUN's frequencies? Maybe not. Right now, these frequencies might be redundant. It might be beneficial for the government to rebid and reallocate. And fifth, ownership. Compared to Globe's corporate structure, PLDT's is very convoluted. SMART is being less than open and transparent. As an entity operating a public utility, it should disclose the beneficial ownership of the foreign companies that form part of its corporate layering. Having said the foregoing, Mr. President, let me just remind SMART and all those who will be applying for franchises that it will no longer be business as usual. We shall be closely scrutinizing each and every application, including that of Innova Communications Incorporated, to ensure that consumers are protected and that a level playing field is maintained. We shall be exercising our oversight powers over government regulators to ensure that they do their jobs. Lastly, a lot has changed in the industry since the Public Telecommunications Policy Act was passed in 1995. Perhaps it is time for Congress to re-examine the way in which the telecommunications sector is being regulated. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hontiveros.
May we recognize Senator Lacson to explain his vote, Mr. President, and so that we can correct the number earlier.
Senator Lacson is
Mr.
recognized.
President, may this representation be informed how his vote was counted
Secretary.
or recorded?
As per the Secretary, Senator Lacson's vote was registered in the affirmative.
I am casting a negative vote, Mr. President, and I will explain very briefly. Even though I lost in my proposed amendment during the votation, but I still maintain that grantee PLDT is different from grantee SMART, and therefore, what PLDT is required to do, that is to list publicly within 2 years, should also be required of SMART when we renew their franchise. That's all, Mr. President.
The Chair takes note, and the appropriate correction will be put into the record.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 209 under Committee Report Number 35.
Any objection? Hearing none.
We request the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act declaring the 25th day of August of every year as the National Textbook Day.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 9, thereby complying with the 3-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading, Senate Bill 1277. I'm sorry, Senate Bill 209 for
In
third
objection?
reading with a roll
Hearing
call
none.
vote.
The Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 18 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, and 0 abstention, Senate Bill number 209 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President. Mr. President. Majority Leader.
Senator
Senator
Zubiri. is
Zubiri, Mr.
recognized.
President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, earlier today, I got a call from two of our colleagues who are out on official mission, official business. This is Senator Cayetano and Senator Joel Villanueva. And they had asked me to just manifest that although the Senate does not allow absentee voting because they're not here today, they would just like to give for the record their explanation, if they were here, of their vote tomorrow when they arrive, Mr. President. I hope that that manifestation is noted by the Senate. Thank you.
It will be a manifestation tomorrow, Mr. President, and we will allow a manifestation. We cannot counted into the votes.
Yes.
We'll do so. Thank you, Mr. President.
The chair,
In the meantime, I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 1277 under Committee Report Number 19.
Majority Floor Leader Senator Poe is recognized.
Sabi nga, iba naman to eh. 1277, Mr. President. I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 1277 under Committee Report Number 19.
Any objection? Hearing none.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act establishing the free internet access program in public spaces in the country and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 9, 2017, thereby complying with the three-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading Senate Bill 1277 through a roll call vote.
Any objection? Hearing none. The Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Onasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 18 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstention, Senate Bill number 1277 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, may we recognize the President Pro Tem to explain his vote?
Yep. Senate President Pro Temp, Senator Ralph Recto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my pleasure to finally vote on a bill which I first filed in May of 2014. Although the Free National Wi-Fi project is now in full swing by virtue of another legislative route through 3 General Appropriations Acts, including this year's, still the best way to guarantee its continuation is through a charter. As we speak, DICT maintained Wi-Fi spots are mushrooming all over the country. By end of the year, it is projected that 13,024 sites covered by 18 points of presence in 1,489 towns and 145 cities are up and running. The funding came from the 4.8 billion appropriated since 2015. To firewall this public service from being knocked down by changing political winds, to prevent the plug from being pulled, the passage of this bill is required. More so that much remains to be done. For this year and next, 1,880 public elementary schools, 2,688 public high schools, and 682 state colleges and universities are targeted for connection. Overall, the aim is to roll out 23,631 sites by 2018, expanding it to fourfold to 100,349 by 2026. When it was conceived, government-run free Wi-Fi hotspots were meant for social good and not for the sole purpose of allowing anyone to post only Instagram photos or selfies on Facebook. That they will be set up in public hospitals so that if you're the son of an OFW in Italy, you can update your mom via Viber on the recovery of a loved one who has been stricken ill. Or if the hospital staff would like to transmit a patient's data, then there's a facility for that as well. That they will be set up in schools to enrich learning so that both teachers and students could tap into the infinite sources of knowledge available online. That they will be set up in MRT stations so you can message your hot date with sad emoticons, that you will be late because one of the last struggling coaches of MRT has broken down again. That they will be set up in municipal halls so that if you're applying for a license or permit in one of the offices and you forgot to bring one requirement, a photocopy can be immediately emailed to you. Others may deride free public Wi-Fi hotspots as populist-driven conveniences. Sadly, those who embrace this falsehood have not been able to fully grasp the empowering potential of ICT. Because the only way to view free Wi-Fi hotspots, my friends, is to treat them for what they are, as a form of liberation technology. Yes, trolls, fake news purveyors, and manufacturers of weapons of mass destructions ride on the same technology platform, but the damage to individual brains or collective consciousness they inflict is far smaller than the greater good that ICT brings. For every troll farm, there are millions of farmers whose lives have been made better by ICT. The truth is, mass Wi-Fi services form part of the ICT solutions, which can ease the pain caused by the many problems we confront today, if not make them totally go away. In the same way that need is the mother of invention, or demand ushers in efficiency, or mass use triggers innovation, it is hoped that big government investments in free Wi-Fi spots would nudge forward the upstream reforms in the telecom sector we all would like to see. And in this bill are provisions that will improve internet speed, better broadband services, slash the red tape that retards ICT growth. If we want 1,000 Wi-Fi spots to bloom, we must cut the thicket of regulations choking its growth. Permitting problems encountered by DICT, contractors, and telcos in putting up facilities must be ended in one declogging sweep of administrative bottlenecks. Permit me to cite a few which this bill prescribes. The DICT shall streamline the process for the application, renewal, and release of permits, licenses, and clearances needed for the construction of infrastructure or installation of equipment. Licenses and permits must be approved and released within 7 days after submission of complete requirements and payment of the corresponding fees. The DICT shall prohibit any unfair methods of competition and exclusivity arrangements in favor of a single telecommunications entity. The DICT, in coordination with the NTC, shall be allowed to use available and unassigned spectrum for the free public internet access program. The excess capacity of private sector partners may be offered to deliver supplemental internet access service for a reasonable fee. To lower costs, increase and improve the free internet access for public spaces, private service providers are encouraged to exchange data traffic at domestic internet protocol exchanges, which may be designated by the DICT. The NTC shall provide minimum standards for quality of service, including but not limited to download speed, latency, packet loss, and jitter for public free internet service. The minimum quality of service standards for free public internet access services shall not be lower than minimum quality of service standards provided for retail basic internet connectivity services offered to the public. All of this must be done because the benchmark in gauging effectivity is not just the number of Wi-Fi spots, but also internet speed. If internet access is a human right, then Wi-Fi is a basic public service. But for it to become one, the hindrances which bar its full enjoyment by the people must first be removed. Paano ang bawat one magiging konektado kung ang mga regulasyon ay magulo? In closing, I would like to thank Senator Bam, the better Aquino, for his expert shepherding of this bill. I vote yes to this measure, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Recto.
Senator Pangilinan, Mr. President.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would just like to place on record that, while being the principal author of this measure in the Senate, that I be allowed to submit a written explanation of our vote, of my vote, and that the same be spread into the record.
Chair takes
Just a manifestation.
Mr. President, I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 1304 under Committee Report number 28.
Any objection? Hearing none.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act accelerating universal access to tertiary education by providing for a tuition subsidy and financial assistance to students enrolled in state universities and colleges, private higher education institutions, and technical vocational institutions, and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 9, 2017, thereby complying with the 3-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading Senate Bill 1304 through a roll call vote.
Any objection? Hearing none, the Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
Thank you. With 18 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstention, Senate Bill number 1304 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Bam Aquino to explain his vote.
Senator Bam Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, Majority Floor Leader, maraming salamat. More than an explanation of my vote, I would just like to thank the individuals and groups that have come together to support this very important measure, providing free tuition fee for our SUCs and even scholarships for our private sector higher education institutions. Mga kaibigan, napasa po natin ngayon ang Affordable Higher Education for All Act. Truly an important day in the 17th Congress. As my colleagues know very well, nothing that passes through the Senate can be attributed to one person alone, one office alone, which is why this team effort from across the aisle must be recognized, Mr. President. Firstly, I would like to thank Senator Recto, who has been working at this advocacy for more than a decade already, Senators Gordon, Lacson, and Ontiveros, who provided very good amendments, Mr. President, that truly improved our bill. We would like to thank also our co-authors, Senators Villanueva, Ejercito, Gatchalian, who's also been working at this advocacy for many years, Senators Pangilinan, Angara, Legarda, De Lima, Villar, Zubiri, and Senator Gordon again. Special mention, Mr. President, goes to our Majority Floor Leader, Senator Tito Soto, and Senator Chis Escudero, the new Chairman of Education, for allowing me to finish this important measure and take it to the finish line. We'd also like to thank Senate President Pimentel, Mr. President, who made this the priority measure for this particular session time. Allow me also to thank Secretary Licuanan, Chairperson Licuanan, Commissioners Alarcon, Brillantes, De Vera, and Adamat of CHED, who helped us with this bill, even if at the beginning we may have had our share of disagreements. We'd like to thank particularly Nikki Tenazas of CHED and our friends in Unifast for ushering us, for guiding us in the different provisions that we had to tackle through our interpolations. Also, Mr. President, our friends in PIDS, SEAP, COCOPEA, PAPSCO, PACO, and PBED for their critical inputs for this measure, and of course, Dr. Rotoras of PASUC for providing us insights that only the SUCs could provide us. But lastly, Mr. President, I would like to thank our students, yung mga kabataan po natin who continue to be our inspiration in passing this measure. Because alam po natin yung pinagdadaanan ng mga estudyante po natin, kung gaano kahirap ang kanilang kinalalagyan at kung gaano po nila kailangan ang batas na ito. Some of them are here, our friends from the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, Akbayan Youth, UP Bukluran, as well as students from UP, Rizal Technological University, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Philippine State College of Aeronautics, the Technological University of the Philippines, and Marikina Polytechnic College. They're here, Mr. President, to witness this very important third reading. They're here to show support for this measure and to show support for the senators who have passed this bill in record time. Mga kaibigan, we saw that this passage of the Affordable Higher Education for All Act is a clear message from the Senate to every Filipino that we prioritize education, that we choose to invest first and foremost in our students, our children, in the next generation. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, if I may say so, this investment as a country is the best that we can undertake. Maraming salamat ulit, Mr. President at mga colleagues. Maraming salamat sa passage ng batas na ito.
Thank you, Senator Aquino.
Mr. President, there are other members of the Senate who wish to manifest or to explain their vote. So may we recognize Senator Gatchalian, and then Senator Recto, and Senator Hontiveros, Mr. President, in that order.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief manifestation, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to thank the Senate for approving this very important reform in tertiary education. Sa ngayon po, wala na pong mayaman at mahirap po na makakatanggap ng college diploma. Lahat po ng ating mga kababayan ay mabibigyan po ng oportunidad makapagtapos sa kolehiyo at makapaghanap ng magandang trabaho. And moreover, Mr. President, I would like to manifest also that I would submit a more comprehensive explanation of my vote in the proper time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian. Senator Zubiri is recognized.
Mr. President, I'm sorry. It was, the order is Senator Recto, Hontiveros, and then Subiri, Mr. President.
Senator Recto is recognized.
Mr. President, my dear colleagues, as I've always said as principal author of this bill, the cost that this bill would entail are not unrecoverable expenses. They are investments with huge high returns. Some will only see the billions in this measure and warn of the deficit they might incur. But let us see them from what they really are, as means to realize dreams. A nation's progress depends on the quality of its human capital. Education dictates whether it prospers or it remains poor. But building the country's talent pool is not the responsibility of families alone. Government has to do and give its share. As I've said, college education has a good rate of return, better than what banks can offer. In fact, the best form of investment is to educate oneself. In one study, college education posts a 15% return, which shows that the best investment certificate is a college diploma. A college graduate earns 140% more than that of a high school graduate, except notable outliers like Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, John Gokong Wei, and Ricky Dason. In the local ICT sector, the wage ratio between a skilled college graduate and an unskilled personnel is as high as 6. The rates of return to high school and college graduates are rising, accompanied by a widening of the gap between them. A college diploma is a ticket out of poverty. But sadly, there are many students who cannot make this trip on their own. Many poor and middle-class youth do not have the financial self-propulsion. Overall, 40% of high school graduates do not proceed to college. And for those who manage to enter college campus as freshmen, only 6 out of 10 will march up the stage to claim their diplomas. It is a marathon with a high mortality rate. And oftentimes not because a student does not have the head for it, he even has the heart, but because he does not have the money. This is the truth. More are waylaid by financial exhaustion than by intellectual burnout. Madalas kong sabihin na ang diploma ay hindi lang katibayan ng pagtatapos. Ito rin ay resibo ng panggastos. Kaya ang panukalang ito ay naglalayong obligahin ang pamahalaan na tumulong sa gastos. This bill will benefit poor, near poor, including the middle class. But if a rising tide raises all ships, including the rich, then it should not be used as an argument against this measure. There are, however, guidelines that will bar the affluent from getting a free lunch. While government will contribute in his education, the biggest equity will be borne by the student himself. Free tuition and other aids are not an entitlement without condition. First, a student must qualify for college admission. That is the starting hurdle he must pass. Of course, he must pass the test. This bill does not override admission protocols. Thus, it is a merit-based aid and one that can be maintained by merit alone. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, because they go against convention, brave social legislations are birthed under hard circumstances. 30 years ago, there was no universal high school education. The law making it free and mandatory only came in 1988. The free public high school was first implemented during the 1988-1989 school year. So this bill is but a natural progression. on how our education system matures and develops. Mr. President, at this point, allow me to point out some of the amendments, but I call them improvements that were included in the bill that was presented to the floor. The question on the role of private higher education institutions cropped up. In many areas, the only college is privately owned. The fear is that if we offer free public college tuition, students in private would flock to SUCs. It is a mass migration that will weaken the tertiary education system, or worse, lead to their mass extinction. The solution seen was to expand and strengthen the programs authorized in the UNIFAS law and make them available to HEIs. It is a GASPE for college, a public-private partnership in which the contribution of private colleges will be even bigger than of governments. Private colleges can accommodate more students, and if the quality of instruction they offer is superior, at fraction of the cost in an SUC, everybody wins. Them, the government, and above all, the student, which is the center of this legislation. We should always remember that private colleges and SUCs are not competitors, but are partners in the important work of educating our young. So this bill goes beyond tuition waivers and tuition aid. There is a section here which lays out the many types of educational assistance to be given or received. Taking into account the complex structure of our HEI system and accepting the fact that our students are not homogeneous, we have broadened the options and widened the modalities. This is not a straitjacket, one type of assistance only. Thank you, Mr. President. I vote yes to this very important landmark bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Recto.
Senator Hontiveros, Mr. President.
Senator Hontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and Majority Leader. Mr. President, I'd like to manifest my support for this bill and applaud the inclusion of my amendment making the qualifying examination free of charge for our students. This amendment articulates the sentiment of our students from our youth networks, including Akabayan Youth and the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, and frees our Filipino youth and their families, majority of whom live on less than 80,000 pesos annually, from the additional burden of entrance exam fees. Fees which can instead be redirected to be used for other school-related expenses. I sincerely hope that this affirmative action mechanism brings the dream of college education a step closer to reality for our future scholars ng bayan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hontiveros. Majority Floor Leader.
Senator Zubiri, Mr. President, and then Senator Gordon.
Senator Zubiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this has been a dream for many students, not only in Metro Manila, but in the countryside. When I remember, I can clearly recall, Mr. President, that when I was a congressman, when we needed scholarships for our students, there was always a palakasan system. Those who were close to the CHED, those who were close to the administration, would get a bigger share of the scholarships given out by CHED. And early then on, we were thinking on how to come up with a mechanism to just give our students in the SUCs free education so that they have a chance, a fighting chance in life. They don't have to come from well-to-do families, that everyone who will apply with the state universities and colleges will be given free college education. When I traveled to India one time, Mr. President, I recall my visit to Pune, the city of Pune, wherein they give high value on education, so much so that they produce 40,000 engineers and professionals in that city alone every year. And Pune now has become the fastest growing city in India because of the high value of education that they give their people. I also clearly noticed that during the budget hearings, when I looked at the Philippine Statistics Authority surveys on poverty incidences in the Philippines, areas with a high priority on education, Mr. President, have lower poverty rates. In Mindanao, when I looked at the PSA survey, our neighbors in Zamboanga del Sur had dropped in the rankings from a high 20 in the early 90s and early 2000 to, out of the top 20 poorest provinces in terms of poverty incidences. As a matter of fact, they dropped to 30% in 2012 to 22% poverty incidences in the province of Zamboanga del Sur in 2015, ranking number 49. I had gone and visited the province, Mr. President, to inquire what was their secret to dropping in the PSA poverty index, Mr. President. And the answer to me by the local officials was their high value in education, or their high thrust in educating their constituents. So much so that the provincial government of Zamboanga del Sur put extension campuses of their J.H. Ceriles State University and College, or SUC, in all the municipalities of Zamboanga del Sur. Their excuse, Mr. President, was now you don't need to complain about money for transportation. You don't have to complain anymore about board and lodging, because if they put an extension campus of the state university in the municipality itself, after you graduate from the national high school, you can go directly into the state university and college in the campus, take your tertiary level education, and graduate. And that is why Zamboanga del Sur is number 49 in the poverty incidences under the Philippine Statistics Authority. Another province, Mr. President, is Benguet. Benguet also puts a high priority on education, quality education, and that is why Benguet only has 6.4%, single digits next to the National Capital Region, 6.4% poverty incidence in their province. And they ranked 79 in the last 2015 PSA survey. That's why, Mr. President, putting high value and priority to tertiary education will really improve the problem of poverty in our country. This is the key, Mr. President. This is the key that will unlock the problem of poverty in our country. So I fully support this measure. I congratulate Senator Bam Aquino for sponsoring this, and to all the authors that really pushed hard for this. I congratulate the Senate for spearheading this effort in this administration. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang free college education.
Thank you, Senator Zubiri.
Senator Gordon, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
At the outset, Mr. President, let me congratulate the Senate for having the vision of supporting the bill of Senator Aquino, Senator Gatchalian, and many others, and those who amended this bill. This bill, of course, is a game changer of sorts. Not necessarily a game changer, but as Senator Rector said, and I think I have a very slight variation of his statistics of those kids who go to college. In our country, Mr. President, out of 100 students who enter grade 1, only 68 will reach grade 6. And of that 68, Mr. President, we all know that 48 of the 68 will finish high school. And of that 48, only 17 will finish college. Why is that? Is it because of poverty alone? The reason why this bill I consider a game changer is because this provides hope. This provides confidence to our people who feel that college education is just a mountain so high they will never reach it. So papunta pa lang sila sa taas sa bundok, nakikita nila, mukhang imposible na tayo magkaroon ng pagkakataon, makapagbago ng ating buhay sapagkat malayong-malayong mararating na makadarating ang mga bata, ang mga anak natin, ang kapatid natin sa kolehiyo. Kaya anak, tiisin na lang natin, hindi para sa atin yung mataas sa pag-aaral. Itong batas pong ito ay magbibigay ng bagong ilaw, bagong liwanag sa mga magulang. Na ngayon masasabi na, anak, libre na ang college, may pag-asa ka na makapasok sa college, tapusin mo ng pilit yung grade school at high school. Sa tingin ko, this is why this is a game changer. It provides a beacon of hope. Malinaw na makikita ng mga kapuspalad na hindi lang sila ay kapuspalad,
yung kanilang palad pwedeng gamitin sabay-sabay, mabuhat at maitulak yung gulong ng palad. Na maitulak nila para sa ganon magkaroon ng pagkakataon ang kanilang mga pamilya. Nakikita ko yung mga meron dito sa kabila na nakakatungo, na umaagri sila. At natutuwa naman ako at nare-realize nila yung ating sinasabi dito, sapagkat ito ay maaaring pagpagin natin, ito naman nagawa ng Senado, pero kung di natin papaliwanag ng ganito, eh hindi maintindihan. Bukas makalawa, nakalimutan na yan. Kaya kailangan sabayan ito ng tinatawag na promotion ng ating bansa, na ngayon, kayo nasa grade school at high school, madali na makapasok sa koleyo, paspasan nyo, galingan nyo, pagsikapan nyo, huwag yung isipin yung itururok sa ating utak na mga banyaga nung araw na pagka ikaw ay Pilipino, wala kang pag-asa, lahat mahirap, mahatim ang pangarap at panag-inip. Today, this is what I believe is the meaning of this bill. That is why I took great pains to make sure that I have crafted this bill. And I'm happy that the young man, Ma'am Aquino, has been able to steer this bill with the help of many colleagues, as he pointed out, Senator Lacson, Senator Recto, Senator Gatchalian, and many others here today. So congratulations are indeed in order. But tarry a little. Bago tayo mag-congratulate ng isa't isa, dapat natin tandaan kung ikukumpara natin ang ating edukasyon. Dapat nating malaman ang ating susi ay kalidad na edukasyon. Ano silbi ng edukasyon kung ito ay parang titulo lamang na wala namang ibubuga? Sabi nga ng katabi ko kanina, ang binagalang ko at masipag na si Senator Villar, mag-uusap kami. Sabi niya, sa totoo lang, nasa sipag ko, wala kang koleyo, wala kang education, magagawa mo yan. Alam ko po yan, tatay ko at nanay ko hindi nakatapos ng koleyo. High school graduate lang ang tatay ko at nanay ko. Pero napaaralo kami mga anak at marami pa silang inampon. Pero ang punto de vista po dito na sinasabi po natin dito, mga kapatid at mga kasama, ay talagang mahikayat natin ang ating bayan na magbigay pa ng dagdag sa mga teacher natin. Na talagang makapag-compete na ang teachers natin, hindi sa ibang bansa na mataas ang sweldo, ngunit sa kanilang sarili na dahil doon, hindi na sila dapat mag-alala sa kanilang iuwi sa bahay kung talagang sapat ang sweldo nila. And to me, the beginning is still there. And then tarry a little once more, because there are about 5.6 million kids between the ages of 7 to 16 that will never see education. 5 to 6 million a year. Pag inulit-ulit po ninyo, marami-rami na talagang tayo ay magbubuhat para doon sa 5 to 6 million na yan. And then tayo a little once more. Because in the UNESCO statistics, Mr. President, out of 12 countries kasama ang Pilipinas, na meron tayo, kung di nagkakamali, ay ano nga ba yan? About 1.2 million na bata na out-of-school youth. 1.6 million na mga bata na out-of-school youth na hindi rin magkakaroon na pagkakataon. Sa mga susunod na araw, tungkulin ng Senado na i-address natin yung problema sa teacher, yung problema doon sa mga bata na hindi makapasok dala ng kagat ng kahirapan, at yung mga batang out-of-school youth na hindi makakapasok. Sapagkat, sabi nga ni Senator Recto, and I join him again, na pagka ang investment natin sa kalidad ng education ay baliwala, sayang ang magiging pagkakataon natin dito sa ating bayan na tama ang democratic age natin ngayon, na makapal ang ating batang edad, na kung yan ay bibigyan mo ng kakayahan, we can really zoom up to growths that may never be seen by this country, that have not been seen in this country since its inception. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I salute the Senate, I salute everyone here for working together. Sabi nga natin, hindi lang importante yung ayaw natin, ang importante yung gusto natin. Para hindi tayo kantsaw lamang ng kantsaw, kailangan alam natin ang gagawin natin para sa ganoon, meron tayong development o progress na tinatawag Hindi lamang dahil nagkaroon tayo ng isang batas o ipagmamalaki natin, ngunit ito ay mararamdaman at magkakaroon ng kumpiyansa ang ating mga kababayan na pilitin makapasok sapagkat ngayon hindi na masyadong mataas yung bundok. Kaya nilang hagipin kung sila ay magsisikap. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gordon. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, thank you. That's it for the bills on third reading for today. There will be more for tomorrow. May I just take this opportunity to give notice to the members of the Committee on Ethics so that it will comply with the rules of the Senate that we are announcing, or I am calling for a meeting of the Committee on Ethics on Wednesday at 1 p.m. in my conference room. So for the record, Mr. President, so that the members of the Committee on Ethics be given due notice. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Chair takes note.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business before the other sponsorship speeches.
The Secretary will read the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 7 March 2017 it passed House Bill number 4727 entitled An Act Imposing the Death Penalty on Certain Heinous Crimes, repealing for the purpose Republic Act number 9346 entitled An Act Prohibiting the Imposition of Death Penalty in the Philippines, and further amending Act number 3815 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, and Republic Act number 9165, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
Bills on first reading. Senate Bill number 1373 entitled An Act to Strengthen the Human Rights Affairs Office of the Philippine National Police and to further amend Republic Act number 6975, otherwise known as an Act establishing the Philippine National Police under the reorganized Department of the Interior and Local Government, and for other purposes as amended, and for other purposes by Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Justice and Human Rights, and Finance.
1374, an act amending Republic Act number 8551, otherwise known as the Philippine National Police Reform and Reorganization Act of 1998, and Republic Act number 6975, otherwise known as the Department of Interior and Local Government Act of 1990, and for other purposes by Senator Richard J. Gordon.
Mr. President,
Senator Drilon is recognized.
before you make the referral, we note that in this order of business, Senate Bill 1373 and 1374, which appear to be covering the same subject, are referred to two different committees, whereas 1373 is referred to the Committee on Public Order, 1374, which also pertains to the Philippine National Police and Republic Act, is being referred to the Committee on Justice as the primary committee. May we know if this is a typographical error, Mr. President?
Mr. President,
Pareho pong topic dito eh.
Mr. President, may we have a 1-minute suspension?
Session suspended.
Alama sponsorship.
We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, we thank the Minority Leader for calling our attention. There must have been a different understanding. So I move that 1374 be referred to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and secondarily to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and Finance, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
May we continue with the order of business then?
Secretary will continue.
1375, an act creating a National Transportation Safety Board, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Public Services, and Finance.
1376, an act providing for a Magna Carta of workers in informal economy, institutionalizing mechanism for implementation thereof and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1377, an act to establish a job training program for mature or older workers. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development, and Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development.
1378, an act regulating the use of government ambulances, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, and Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
1379, an act establishing the Public Health Emergency Council, providing powers therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, and Local Government.
1380, an act mandating the appointment of barangay health workers in every barangay, amending for the purpose Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code, further expanding the benefits of barangay officials and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Local Government and Health and Demography.
1381, an act increasing the penalties for non-compliance of the prescribed increases and adjustments in the wage rates of workers, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 6727, otherwise known as the Wage Rationalization Act, and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development.
1382, an act amending sections 5 and 8 of Republic Act number 9505, otherwise known as the Personal Equity and Retirement Account Law, and for other purposes. Senator Sani Angara.
To the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies, and Ways and Means.
1383, an act exempting the Bureau of Customs from the coverage of Republic Act number 6758, otherwise known as the Salary Standardization Law, as amended, and for other purposes. Senator Sani Angara.
To the Committees on Ways and Means, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
Majority Floor Leader.
President, with the permission of the Chamber, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Senate Bill 286 under Committee Report 37.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I move to consider Senate Bill 286 under Committee Report 37.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Will the Secretary read the title of the measure, please?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act providing for a cost of living allowance for all officials and employees in the government sector and for other related purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, Senator Antonio Trillanes IV, be recognized.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Maraming salamat, Mr. President. Your Committee on Civil Service, Government Organization, and Professional Regulation has the honor to sponsor Senate Bill number 286 under Committee Report number 37, entitled An Act Providing for a Cost of Living Allowance for all officials and employees in the government sector and for other related purposes. It is the policy of the state to promote, nurture, and protect the interest of the workers in the public sector. The basic requirement is to adjust the salaries of government officials and employees over the years to help them endure the economic challenges brought about by the undeniable upsurge in the cost of living. This challenge, especially with the recent upsurge in the inflation rate and spiraling prices of gasoline and basic commodities, has rendered the previous adjustments in the salaries through the recent Executive Order number 201 insufficient and inadequate. To help alleviate the adverse effects of the increase in the prices of basic necessities, Senate Bill number 286 seeks to provide additional financial assistance to be known as the Cost of Living Allowance, or COLA, to all civilian government employees and the members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, and other uniformed personnel, whether employed by the national or local government agencies and or instrumentalities, appointive or elective, whether occupying regular, contractual, or casual positions. All of the aforementioned government employees shall uniformly receive 5,000 pesos as COLA to be implemented across the board, on top of the other existing mandatory allowances they are currently receiving. Funding of the said measure shall be sourced from the General Appropriations Act, particularly from the Miscellaneous Personal Benefits Fund or any savings realized by the government from the current GAA, and shall thereafter be included in the annual General Appropriations Act. In the case of government-owned and controlled corporations and financial institutions, the source of funds shall be from the respective corporate funds, and in the case of LGUs, from their respective local funds or LGU share in the internal revenue allotments. This measure seeks to address the said contingencies and to recognize our government employees' contributions to public service by providing every government worker just and reasonable compensation, to allow them to have decent living conditions and to be able to meet the basic needs of their families for shelter, daily sustenance, education, and medical attendance. Mr. President, it is in this light that your committee is pushing for the expeditious passage of this humble measure. It is high time that government employees be granted additional allowance to shield them from erratic economic conditions brought about by market forces. In view of the foregoing, I hope that our colleagues will support the immediate passage of this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Trillanes. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. To give time to the other members of the Senate to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend Senate Bill 286 under Committee Report number 37.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, before I proceed with the next item on the agenda, may I manifest, may we recognize the Minority Leader, Mr. President, to manifest the composition of the minority in the Commission on Appointments so that the Commission on Appointments will be well notified as of today.
The Minority Floor Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. In view of the reorganization that took place on February 27, the minority contingent of the Senate in the Commission on Appointment is now composed of this representation, Senator Francis Pangilinan and Senator Bam Aquino. This representation and Senator Pangilinan and Aquino are actually members of the Commission on Appointments today, only that they represent the majority. And further, Mr. President, given again the change in the composition, we manifest that Senator Francis Pangilinan is the minority leader representing the minority in the Commission on Appointments. So we make that of record, and we request the Secretary to make the appropriate communication to the Commission on Appointments.
We concur with the manifestation. Senator Pangilinan is designated by the minority as the minority leader in the Senate, in the, in the Commission on Appointments, Mr. President.
So we entered into the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special order Senate Bill 453 under Committee Report Number 38.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I move to consider Senate Bill 453 under Committee Report Number 38.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Civil Service, Governmental Organization, and Professional Regulations, Senator Antonio Trillanes IV, be recognized.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Maraming salamat, Mr. President. Your Committee on Civil Service, Governmental Organization, and Professional Regulation has the honor to sponsor Senate Bill number 453 under Committee Report number 38, entitled An Act Granting Survivorship Benefits to the Surviving Legitimate Spouse or Dependent Child of a Deceased Member, whether in the active service or retired, of the Office of the Solicitor General. Mr. President, the Office of the Solicitor General is the government's representative in any litigation, proceeding, investigation, or matter requiring the services of lawyers. It is considered the government's law firm and the tribune of the people, handling cases of national and public interest. Under RA number 9417, the Solicitor General shall have the cabinet rank and the same qualifications for appointment, rank, prerogatives, salaries, allowances, benefits, and privileges, such as the presiding justice of the Court of Appeals, Assistant Solicitor General, those of an Associate Justice of the Court of Appeals, and Senior State Solicitor, State Solicitor 2, and State Solicitor 1, those of a Regional Trial Court Judge, Metropolitan Trial Court Judge, and Municipal Trial Court Cities Judge, respectively. These OSU officials are exposed to the same occupational risks, including health and security risks, as these judiciary officials, considering the nature and number of cases they handle. It is just right, Mr. President, that these OSU officials must be afforded the same benefits being received by the members of the judiciary as a way of recognizing their efforts and sacrifices they have rendered to the government and to our people. In 2010, RA number 9946 was enacted to provide additional retirement benefits, survivorship, and other benefits to the members of the judiciary. The OSG and the judiciary members should have the same allowances and benefits as stated in Republic Act number 9417. There is no law that would provide the same adjustment in the benefits of the members of the OSG. In order to address this gap, Senate Bill number 453 seeks to upgrade the retirement benefits of a Solicitor General, Assistant Solicitor General, Senior State Solicitor, or State Solicitor of the Office of the Solicitor General by granting survivorship benefits to the surviving legitimate spouse or dependent child of a deceased retired member. The above-mentioned immediate family members shall be entitled to receive on a monthly basis all the retirement benefits due to the OSG official at the time of death under the provisions of applicable retirement laws then in force. They shall continue to receive such retirement benefits until said surviving legitimate spouse remarries or when dependent child marries or comes of age. Those benefits are intended to recognize and honor members of the Office of the Solicitor General, many of whom have rendered decades, if not a lifetime, of service to our people, and hopefully assist their family members who will be left behind in their passing. In view of the foregoing, I urge our colleagues to support the immediate passage of the measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Trillanes. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, to give time to the members to study the bill, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 453 under Committee Report Number 38.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special order Senate Bill 807 under Committee Report Number 39.
Any objection? Hearing none.
I move to consider Senate Bill 807 under Committee Report Number 39.
Any objection? Hearing none.
May we ask Secretary to read the title of the measure, Mr.
The
President?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act increasing to 3,000 pesos the monthly personnel economic relief allowance granted to government employees, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
To sponsor the measure, Mr. President, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Civil Service, Government Organization, and Professional Regulations, Senator Antonio Trillanes IV, be recognized.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Civil Service, Government Organization, and Professional Regulation has the honor to sponsor Senate Bill Number 807 under Committee Report Number 39, entitled An Act Increasing to 3,000 Pesos the Monthly Personal Economic Relief Allowance, or PERA, granted to government employees, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Mr. President, in 1993, President Fidel Ramos signed Administrative Order Number 53, which granted 500 peso additional compensation to all government employees in order to cushion the impact of the increasing prices of commodities brought about by the Gulf crisis. However, the financial crisis persisted, and this additional compensation became more than just an emergency fund, but an economic relief fund. In 2009, this Personal Economic Relief Allowance, or PERA, was increased to 2,000 pesos through Joint Resolution Number 4. However, with the continued increase in the prices of basic commodities and the recent upsurge in inflation, your committee believes that it is high time that we augment the PERA to help our government workers cope with the economic difficulties. On top of the proposal to institute cost of living allowance, SBN 807 seeks to increase the current monthly PERA of all government employees from 2,000 to 3,000 pesos. This act shall cover all civilian employees of government and members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, and other uniformed personnel, whether employed by national or local government agencies and or instrumentalities, appointive or elective, and whether occupying regular, contractual, or casual positions. The funding of the said increase shall be included in the General Appropriations Act. For local government units, the same shall be charged against respective local funds, and for government-owned and controlled corporations, the same shall be charged against their respective corporate funds. Mr. President, similar to our other measures which aim to provide additional or improved benefits to our government workers, passing this measure is the least we can do to shield the salaries of our government employees from the negative impact of inflation. Although the proposed amount may not be enough to defray all the living costs of our beloved government workers, the increase is significant and will definitely go a long way in helping them with their daily needs. In view of the foregoing, I hope that our colleagues will support the immediate passage of this measure. Salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Trillanes. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, to give time to the members to study the bill, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 807 under Committee Report Number 39.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Sorry, Mr. President, to deliver a co-sponsorship speech, may we recognize Senator Ralph Recto.
Senator Ralph Recto is recognized.
I withdraw my original motion for suspending the consideration, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, one item in the government employee pay slip turns 26 this year. In June of 1991, pursuant to the year's General Appropriations Act, a personnel economic relief allowance in the amount of 500 pesos a month was granted to all government employees. 2 years later, an additional compensation or ADCOM of 500 pesos per month was added when President Ramos issued Administrative Order 53 in 1993. In 2006, President Arroyo raised the ADCOM to 1,500 pesos a month. 3 years later, under Joint Resolution Number 4 of Congress, the 1.5 ADCOM was merged with the 500 pera, with the latter as a surviving nomenclature. In the 8 years that pera has been nailed at 2,000 pesos, rice prices have soared by 21.8% and the peso has lost 26.7% of its value to inflation. Thus, this bill seeks to recover the erosion in pera's worth by increasing it to 3,000 pesos a month. Admittedly, the 1,000 increase will not allow government workers to get rich, not even to fully get by. But if reckoned annually, the 12,000 increase will help pay certain bills, like a semester's tuition in an SUC, or 6 sacks of rice, or for a small family, probably a year's water bills plus cable TV subscription. Although a 1,000 increase may not be enough, the financing it requires is enormous. The present 2,000 pera costs taxpayers 33 billion a year. Raising it to 3,000 would require 16.5 billion more. Taken against the big personnel services or PS picture of the government, the 33 billion is 3% of the almost 1 trillion PS outlay this year. It would have been scandalous if the proposed pera increase is a sole pay amelioration initiative in the public sector since 2006. But in the 12 years since, there have been pay or across-the-board allowance increase in 8 of those years. In 2006, the 1,000 ADCOM was granted. In 2007, a 10% increase in the basic monthly salaries of civilian government personnel. Also that year, the subsistence allowance of uniformed personnel was increased by 30 pesos a day. Their hazard pay was also increased. In 2008 came the 10% across-the-board increase in basic monthly salaries of government personnel. This was followed by 4 annual installments of the SSL-3 from 2009 to 2012. The SSL-4, to be given in 4 gives, commenced last year. By 2019, there would have been 10 annual government pay increases in the past 14 years. Not only that, there were also upward adjustments in the special allowance of certain government employees in some of those years. To cite an example, the 60 peso increase in the daily subsistence allowance of uniformed personnel authorized by Joint Resolution Number 2 in 2015, which was authored by Senator Sonny Trillanes. Another is the increase through an executive fiat in the actual combat pay of soldiers and policemen last year. This is EO3 issued by President Duterte on September 1, 2016. There are reports that some qualified personnel have yet to get theirs. If true, it is hoped that these outstanding payables will be settled soon, especially if owed to brave men who are in the line of fire. In the light of these increases, this bill seeks to lift the embargo on pera adjustments, but at a level government finances can afford. It is born out of the stark realization that many urgent needs of our people compete for scarce resources, like health and education, and irrigation and roads, all of which require amelioration as well. Pegging an increase that is not too big to fund effectively denies the executive branch of any excuse to veto a very reasonable measure. While it will add a little amount in the government's pocket, in the employee's pocket, it won't burn a hole in the government's. Thus, it will be hard, if not heartless, to reject a bill such as this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Recto. Majority Floor Leader.
With that, Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 807.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for session orders, Committee Report number 46.
Any objection? Hearing none.
I move to consider Committee Report number 46.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, this is the committee report on the privileged speech and motion of Senator Antonio Trillanes IV on the referral of the alleged involvement of SPO3 Arturo Las Cañas on the issues on extrajudicial killings and the Davao Death Squad revealed during his press conference. So, Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, sponsor the measures in the committee report, may we ask the chairman of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Senator Pampilo Lacson, be recognized. Mr. President, I withdraw the motion, Mr. President. Withdraw the motion, Mr. President.
Chair takes note.
All right. Mr. President, we have a 1-minute suspension.
Session suspended.
We ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session resume.
Mr. President, mea culpa. The committee report is correct. The committee report number is correct. The title is wrong, and so it's my fault. This is the committee report of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs on the Mayor Espinosa killing, the mayor of Albuera. So I move to recognize the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs Chairman, Senator Pampilo Lacson.
Senator Lacson is recognized.
Mr. President, fellow members of this august chamber, this representation has the honor to report on the Senate floor the result of the inquiry in aid of legislation conducted jointly by the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and the Committee on Justice and Human Rights into the killing of Mayor Rolando Espinosa Sr. of Albuera Leyte as embodied in Committee Report number 46. Mr. President, running on a platform of eradicating illegal drugs and capturing big-time drug dealers and protectors, then-candidate Rodrigo Roa Duterte had won the May 2016 presidential elections. Upon his assumption of office, he launched a relentless war against drugs. A few months after, this war has become a hotbed of controversy. The absolute discretion granted to the Philippine National Police in delivering the President's campaign promise was exploited, even abused by some police scalawags. Mr. President, allow me to commence this report by quoting President Duterte himself. Abuse your authority and there will be hell to pay, for you will have become worse than criminality itself, unquote. The integrity and conviction of his words will be put to test when what is at stake is not only the career but also the liberty of a certain Superintendent Marvin Win Marcos and other members of the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group, Region 8, whom we all have all seen during our public hearings. Mr. President, on November 5, 2016, while alone inside his prison cell in Baybay Sub-Provincial Jail, Albuera Mayor Rolando Espinosa Sr. was killed in an alleged shootout with the operatives of the CIDG Region 8 in the course of implementing a search warrant. Nanlaban at napatay. Tila ito na yung default justification ng lahat ng drug-related killings na laman ng ating mga balita. Mr. President, the fact that an incumbent mayor had fallen in this war against illegal drugs is controversial enough. As we went through the facts and considered other reports, we discovered that what was shown before us is more intricate and complex than what was then presented. Although this joint committee recognizes and gives due respect to the authority of the courts to determine whether the death of Mayor Espinosa was a result of a legitimate police operation or a case of premeditated murder, we are convinced that the circumstances of this case clearly present a systematic clean-up made on any living trace that may reveal the involvement of several CIDG operatives in Kerwin Espinosa's drug trade. After all, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, and I quote, "3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead," unquote. Apart from Mayor Espinosa, other persons connected with the drug trade of Kerwin Espinosa in Region 8, namely Edgar Alan Alvarez and Fernando Balagbis, suffered the same fate while incarcerated. Mr. President, the odds of being killed by the PNP while detained inside a government detention facility seemed to be very unlikely until now. Further, it is unbelievable that such similar fate would befall personalities involved in Kerwin Espinosa's drug trade. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this joint committee has found compelling reasons, based on evidence, to overturn the presumption of regularity accorded to the implementation of the search warrants conducted by the team of Police Superintendent Marvin Marcos, Police Chief Inspector Laraga, and other CIDG personnel together with members of the Regional Maritime Unit. Mr. President, this joint committee has conducted 3 public hearings and 1 executive session regarding this inquiry. I beg your indulgence as I discuss briefly the basis of our conclusion that the killing of Mayor Espinosa was not the see the firearms. Number 3, none of the statements contained in the affidavits executed by the jail guards and the inmates could corroborate the allegation of facts and the details presented by Police Superintendent Marcos and Police Chief Inspector Laraga on how they implemented the search warrants. Number 4, instead of seeking assistance during the implementation of the warrant, the CIDG 8 personnel made the jail guards and the PNP personnel in the jail facility kneel down, face the wall, and surrender their firearms. Number 5, the CIDG's blatant violation of the rule that law enforcement officers cannot go beyond the area specified in a search warrant in terms of the area to be searched. The search warrant could not be more clear. The area to be searched were cells number 1 and 2. However, the operatives proceeded to and searched cell number 7 just because Raul Yap was actually detained there. Number 6, the intentional and deliberate disregard for the chain of command in the PNP CIDG when Police Superintendent Marcos did not notify his immediate superiors, Police Chief Superintendent Elmer Beltejar, the Police Regional Office 8 Regional Director, and CIDG Director Roel Obusan of the operation against a high-profile detainee in the person of Mayor Espinosa. Number 7, the illegal items reported in the inventory after the search were merely planted by the CIDG team in order to justify their operation. Mr. President, this joint committee has accorded value to the affidavit submitted by the jail guards and inmates stating the previous conduct of Oplan Galugad by the jail guards a few days before the CIDG operation, which yielded no illegal firearms and drugs. In addition, we considered the testimony of two inmates stating that they heard Mayor Espinosa telling the CIDG operatives that he did not have any firearm in his possession and pleaded them not to plant the same inside his cell. Number 8, the incredible narration of Police Chief Inspector Laraga on how he was able to fire at Mayor Espinosa, notwithstanding the alleged total darkness in his cell. To be more detailed, according to him, he was able to aim his gun properly after taking advantage of the spark coming from Mayor Espinosa's gun when he initially fired at his team. Number 9, the erroneous timeline of events presented by Police Superintendent Marcos in his accomplishment report and his testimony during the public hearings. According to Police Superintendent Marcos, the operation began at 4:10 a.m. However, we have on record the affidavit of PO2 Jennifer Monge stating that at 3:49 a.m., Police Superintendent Matira called the PNP RTOC, Regional Tactical Operations Office, Regional Office 8, requesting for the assistance of SOCO. Number 10, the hard drive containing the recordings of the CCTV cameras inside Baybay Sub-Provincial Jail, which went missing immediately after the CIDG team had full control over the penal facility. Finally, Mr. President, number 11, the testimony of Kerwin Espinosa in one of our public hearings confirming that he gave considerable amounts of money to the leaders of the CIDG operation subject of this inquiry. In fact, Police Superintendent Marcos had received a sum of 3 million pesos just last May 2016. Mr. President, allow me to go back to a few of my questions in my opening statement when this inquiry was commenced. Why would Mayor Espinosa even attempt to put up a fight while he was trapped inside a prison cell with nowhere to go? Not to mention that he had surrendered and was fully cooperating, hoping to become a state witness. Nothing makes sense. Truly, up to now, there is no sense to it. Mr. President, after a thorough consideration of all the testimonies and documents submitted, let me tell you that everyone closely following this case, hindi po nanlaban si Mayor Espinosa. Mr. President, Mayor Espinosa, in his possible willingness to cooperate and provide information on the personalities involved in his son's drug trade, was silenced by individuals who wanted their participation concealed. It just so happened that these individuals had access and means to do so through abuse of their authority. Moreover, his death posed a clear threat to his son, Kerwin Espinosa, who was already captured and was on his way back to the Philippines at that time. The death of Alvarez, Balagbis, and even his father while inside their respective penal institutions is a statement that Kerwin is not safe anywhere and that the same fate awaits him should he decide to speak up and provide information that will aid the PNP in its war against illegal drugs. At this point, Mr. President, allow me to present the recommendations of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. First of all, Mr. President, let us be reminded that the public hearings conducted do not in any way intend to overstep the authority and jurisdiction of our courts in the determination of the Espinosa and Yap case. However, as co-equal branch, we will request the judiciary to expedite its determination as to the propriety and liabilities or sanctions, if any, of the following. Number 1, Judge Carlos Arguelles for his failure to act upon the motion of Mayor Espinosa to be transferred to a safer prison facility, notwithstanding the fact that the deceased had expressed his intention to fully cooperate with the government and provide vital information relevant and of value to the administration's war against illegal drugs. Number 2, Judge Tarcelo Sabare Jr. of RTC Branch 30, Basay, Samar, for issuing search warrants upon persons detained in a government detention facility located outside his court's jurisdiction. And number 3, Judge Janet Cabalona of RTC Branch 33, Calbiga, Samar, also for issuing search warrants upon persons detained in a government detention facility located outside her court's jurisdiction. Moreover, the Supreme Court should remind lower courts to exercise caution in issuing search warrants, strict adherence to the policy that judges should personally examine the applicant and the witnesses he may produce, with underlying emphasis on the words personally examine should be observed. Next point, Mr. President, we understand that the Espinosa case was filed before the Department of Justice as early as December 7, 2016. 3 months had passed and no resolution yet is forthcoming on the preliminary investigation being conducted. Considering the time, not to mention the overwhelming testimonial and documentary evidence presented before the five-man panel conducting the preliminary investigation, they should have already resolved this matter with urgency. As such, we respectfully request the Department of Justice to expedite its proceedings given that this case is impressed with public interest. In addition, Mr. President, among the intricacies that arose out of this case was the recall of PNP Chief De La Rosa's order relieving Police Superintendent Marcos and his men from CIDG 8 by no less than the President himself. This joint committee is of the opinion that the President should not be micromanaging the affairs of the government and should place his trust in the sound discretion of his appointees, including PNP Chief De La Rosa. Insofar as the organizational and operational aspect of the PNP is concerned, the Chief should be given full authority and control on how he will manage the day-to-day affairs of the organization subject to limitations set by law. Mr. President, the following are the proposed legislative measures that are responsive to the issue at hand. 1. The amendment of Article 1A3 of the Revised Penal Code to increase the penalty of false testimony or perjury. It is our view that injury caused by perjury upon an innocent person is no less similar to that of planting of evidence. Apart from the possibility of being charged and erroneously convicted, we also have to consider its effect on the reputation of the victim and his or her family. 2. The enactment of an Anti-Contraband in Prison Act, penalizing those who would provide, assist, aid, or abet in the introduction of any prohibited object or contraband inside a prison facility, along with the inmate who makes, possesses, or obtains, or attempts to make or obtain the same inside the prison facility, and imposing a stiff penalty for its commission. 3. The strengthening of the functions and mandate of the Internal Affairs Service of the PNP so as to make the disciplinary system more timely, transparent, and efficient. To be more specific, we seek to expand the motu proprio investigation powers of the IAS to cover all acts and omissions which stand
To the sponsor and the chairman of the Committee on Public Order and Illegal Drugs for the comprehensive report that he has submitted to the chamber. Indeed, we signed the report without any reservation. And if we rise today asking that the sponsor to yield the floor for a few questions, it is just for clarification and to emphasize certain points. But let me repeat, Mr. President, for the record, we are fully supportive of the report, and we extend our congratulations to Senator Lacson for a job well done.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to express my thanks to the distinguished Minority Leader for the kind words.
First of all, Mr. President, I recall that in the course of our investigation, there were certain commitments made by the IAS officials particularly, committing on certain timelines upon which this investigation will be finished and the appropriate penalties imposed. As the good sponsor asserted in his sponsorship speech, time is of the essence when he pointed to the Department of Justice preliminary investigation. And we fully concur with that observation, Mr. President. Indeed, the deterrence is when the public sees that justice and punishment is swiftly done. And we do recall that in the course of the of the committee hearings, there were commitments made by the IAS on very specific timelines. May we know what happened to those commitments? And maybe, I'm sorry, if the gentleman can help this representation recall and spread into the record what were these commitments and the timelines, particularly on Superintendent Marcos.
As I recall, Mr. President, they committed to resolve the administrative case on March 31. So it bears watching if they will fully comply with that particular commitment. the commitment that they made, or the timeline, or the deadline that they made, kept on moving, as a matter of fact. But the last deadline that they gave is March 31. So let us all wait for the final resolution of that case. And as per our committee report, which the distinguished minority leader also signed and concurred with, it is a foregone conclusion that the resolution would be such that the uniform or the PNP personnel concerned should be guilty of grave misconduct and should be dismissed from the service, Mr. President.
All right. I'm glad to hear that, Mr. President, and we do hope that the timelines and the commitments can be complied with. Would you recall of any other commitments and the timelines that they made in the course of the hearing, Mr. President?
The Department of Justice also made the commitment to finally file the information after, of course, completing the resolution of the criminal case. And I heard from the Department of Justice that give or take 2 weeks from now, they will be able to resolve the case and file the necessary information in court.
Yes, I noticed that in the report and in the sponsorship, we highlighted with reason the delay in the resolution of the Department of Justice, the sponsor noting the fact that it has been more than 3 months since the case was filed in the Department of Justice, the case having been filed on December 7, 2016.
And it is subject to suspicion because the President, no less than the President himself, came out openly and publicly in trying to protect or defend the action taken by the CIDG 8 personnel. And so the Department of Justice, particularly the panel of prosecutors, are now facing a challenge, or public scrutiny on the action or the resolution that they will finally make or submit to the Secretary of Justice, Mr. President.
May we know, Mr. President, what is that suspicion in the mind of the good sponsor?
That they are under tremendous pressure from no less than the appointing authority, who is the President of the Philippines. Because if the President had expressed publicly that he would go by the action of the police personnel concerned or those involved in the killing of Espinosa and Raul Yap, then the Department of Justice is now facing a great challenge, a tremendous challenge, to come up with an objective resolution of this of the criminal case, Mr. President.
It saddens this representation to hear that, Mr. President, because I do not know if the rule is the same, but during my time, serious offenses of this nature can be appealed to the office of the President. I do not know if that is still the rule today, that a finding of probable cause in serious offenses can be appealed to the office of the President.
I guess that particular rule doesn't change and won't change, Mr. President.
So that
We can always exercise as a body. The Congress can always exercise oversight.
no, I am referring to the possible appeal that
the office
an
of the President.
adverse resolution adverse to the respondents from the Department of Justice can be appealed
And
to the
reversed.
office of the President
And reversed by the President.
and reversed by the President, especially given the statement of the good sponsor that the delay is suspicious, and the suspicion, he cannot avoid making the suspicion that pressures could be brought upon the prosecutors by the appointing authority, which is the President.
If that happens, Mr. President, I might consider very seriously joining the minority group in the Senate.
And we hope it doesn't happen, because the interest of justice should transcend beyond such expression of determination on the part of the good sponsor. We do hope that, justice can be done, the rule of law can be carried out. But as I said, the first order of the day is probably to put the Department of Justice to task for the undue delay in the resolution of this case, and likewise the PNP through the IAS again for the undue delay in the resolution of the administrative aspect of this case.
Rest be assured, Mr. President, distinguished Minority Leader, that in my official and personal capacity, I will follow up with the Department of Justice and the PNP to expedite the resolution of the both administrative and criminal cases.
Would the good sponsor, Mr. President, agree to an amendment which will condemn the undue delay on the part of the Department of Justice and the PNP IAS in the resolution of the criminal and administrative aspects of this case?
Mr. President, I'd rather wait. I would like to think that we should be prudent enough to wait for maybe another week, before I will accede or accept the proposed amendment of the distinguished Minority Leader.
Well, we want to approve this report as soon as possible, so that is why waiting for 1 week will go into our recess. And it will...
nga pala, no?
Oh.
Mr. President, may we propose an amendment to the Minority Leader? We can simply say, call the attention instead of condemning. And I think I will be accepted by the sponsor right away.
In the committee report, we already called the attention of the distinguished Minority Leader wants a stronger language.
Yes. Well, because I think it's really necessary to put this executive branch, particularly the DOJ and the PNP IAS, to task, because this incident has all the indications of a premeditated murder, as pointed out by the good sponsor. And it has been more than 3 months that the case has been pending. That is why resolutions of cases like this would lose its efficacy if we keep on delaying the resolution. We're not saying how the resolution should be rendered. We're just saying that the inordinate delay would not augur well for the trust of the people in the system of justice in our country.
Mr. President,
Yes.
with the permission of the two gentlemen, may we be allowed to sleep on it?
Sure.
We can take it up tomorrow, Mr. President.
We'll open our thesaurus and look for a more, or shall we say, euphemistic word in lieu of condemnation.
Well, because, Mr.
It may
President,
mean the same thing, but there must be some, some words that can substitute for condemnation.
Nevertheless, Mr. President, I believe that we can take this up tomorrow.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, approve the committee report, because I know that we have 100% support to the committee report, especially led by the Minority Leader, Mr. President. So, with the permission of the two gentlemen, may we suspend consideration of the committee report until tomorrow? I will schedule it
just
tomorrow.
one more point before we suspend.
I withdraw my motion, Mr. President.
With the indulgence of the Majority Leader. Mr. President, I know that this is a separate branch of government, and the gentleman sponsor was very careful in putting on record that he does not want, that this chamber would not want to interfere with what otherwise is a judicial process, meaning the disciplinary action on the judges, if so warranted under the circumstances of this case, when a search warrant is issued against a person in the custody of government, which gave reason for Superintendent Marcos and his group to do what they did. Is there anything else that we can do to prompt the judiciary to act more quickly on this matter? Firstly, may we know if there are indeed administrative cases filed against the judges?
It is of personal knowledge of this representation that indeed the Supreme Court is conducting their own investigation to hold liable the judges involved in the issuance of search warrants inside a penal institution, Mr. President. And I think it's only a matter of time before they will come up with their own resolution meting out the appropriate penalties to the judges concerned.
Yes, Mr. President. And maybe before we approve the report, we will consider some proposals for amendment either to the rules of court or, yes, in order that such can be prevented, such incidents that happened here can be prevented. Of course, that is subject to the approval of the Supreme Court, but hopefully before we approve this, the minority group can come up with a proposed amendment to the report so that we can highlight what we can contribute insofar as amendment to the rules are concerned, so that such clear malpractice of issuing a search warrant for people under detention and where the jurisdiction is way out of the jurisdiction of the regional trial court can be corrected and can be prevented from happening in the future again. So with that, Mr. President, yes, we shall be awaiting for tomorrow the proposed amendment of the good sponsor on the ordinate delay in the resolution of the administrative and criminal cases that have been pending for the last several months. Thank you very much, and we suspend our period to interpret.
Thank you, Senator John.
Mr. President, Senator Rivera wants to be recognized.
Senator Hontiveros, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and Majority Leader. To the good sponsor, just a manifestation of support for the whole report, joining my Minority Leader, and citing in particular one point that I really appreciate that the good sponsor raised in his report. The point, Mr. President, on page 7, that this joint committee is of the opinion that the President should not be micromanaging the affairs of the government and should place his trust in the sound discretion of his appointees, including PNP Chief De La Rosa. Insofar as the organizational and operational aspect of the PNP is concerned, the Chief should be given full authority and control on how he will manage the day-to-day affairs of the organization, subject to limitations set by law. I rose, Mr. President, to express participation for the report in general and particularly for this paragraph, given that the President indeed reinstated Superintendent Marcos and further said that the police officers involved in the killing should not go to jail. So once again, Mr. President, my highest appreciation to the good sponsor for this whole report, including this very wise opinion expressed to the President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hontiveros.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we will, for the record, we will schedule the committee report for number 46 tomorrow. Also, the committee report on EJ case will be available for interpellations tomorrow. So, at this point, I move to suspend consideration of committee report number 46.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I move for a 1 minute Senate minute suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Session suspended.
Lane? Second district. We ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session resumed.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of House Bill 4682 under Committee Report Number 48.
Any objection? Hearing none.
This is the measure creating Barangay Comawas in the city of Bislig, Surigao del Sur. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we're in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Law and Government, Senator Sari Angara, and to interpellate yours truly, Mr. President.
Senator Angara is recognized and to interpolate the majority floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is with some trepidation that I am ready to answer questions from the distinguished Majority Leader.
Thank you,
The
Mr.
chair takes
President.
note of your trepidation.
You have already answered my first question. And that is my seeking your permission to ask a few questions on the subject, Mr. President. Mr. President, well, I'm sure most of you know that I've been here since 1992. But in 1992 up to 1998, I was the chairman of the Committee on Local Government. I do not recall a time in those 6 years that we passed a bill creating a barangay. So I'm wondering why this bill is brought to us now.
By legislation.
Do you have an idea? Will the sponsor have an idea of if we've done this before, or I might not have been in the Senate when some barangays were created?
Mr. President, there are 143 barangays which have been created by law since 1992.
Is that so?
Yes, Mr. President.
Is it necessary that it be passed in the Senate? Because what I mean is that sometimes there are bills that emanate from the House that are really just for local government purposes and for local consumption, so to speak, Mr. President. So is this necessary?
Well, there are two ways under the local government code by which a barangay can be created, Mr. President, distinguished Majority Leader. And the first is by law, and the second is by an ordinance of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan.
That's what I mean. Yeah, see, Mr. President, I wonder why they had to resort to a law. No? I'm not against it, as a matter of fact. In fact, when I was Vice Mayor of Quezon City from 1988 to 1992, we wanted to create more barangays for Quezon City because of the big population of the barangays there. Even up to the present, the second district of Quezon City has only 5 barangays, but a voting population of 250,000. In the 6th district of Quezon City, the voting population is 164,000, and they have only 11 barangays.
Mr.
So we
President,
wanted
yeah.
to create more barangays then, but they never materialized. Yes.
If I may comment, I think it's the opposite in the city of Manila, where every street is a barangay, is a different barangay.
Yes. The gentleman is correct, and Senator Gordon and the Minority Leader agree that every street is a barangay in Manila, but in the case of Quezon City and some other barangays in the entire country, they're large. They're bigger than some. Yes, bigger than some cities. As a matter of fact, yes,
That's
it
true.
is true. So I don't know how we can resolve this.
Where is that?
And as I said, no, is this necessary? I'm glad the gentleman has given us the other alternative. Perhaps we can suggest to the House of Representatives so that we can minimize the number of bills that are coming to the Senate from the House. Pagpasok po dito ng mga franchise, pagpasok ng mga district na creation ng mga engineering, water district, the agenda is clogged, Mr. President.
With the permission of both gentlemen, Mr.
Senator
President,
Gordon.
Yes, certainly.
maybe it's about time we start rationalizing the criteria for the creation of barangays, municipalities, and cities, because I know for a fact that there are some barangays that are bigger than municipalities, bigger than cities, and there are cities that have so little a population, and yet they're made cities. So I think it might be a good time now to really reassess the standards upon which a barangay or a municipality or as a city can be reclassified, Mr. President. Just a suggestion.
Mr. President, in response, may I?
Yes.
Mr. President, I second the sentiment of the gentleman from Zambales, and in fact, a month ago, we commenced the review the long overdue review of the local government code, because the local government code provides that there should be a mandatory review every 5 years. And in the 26 years since its passage, there's been no legislative review of the local government code. So upon prodding also from the Vice Chair, Senator Hontiveros, who is in the hall right now, we decided to push through with this, and we welcome the ideas of the gentleman from Zambales and the gentleman, the majority leader, the gentleman from Quezon City, and of course the gentleman from Iloilo, whose government experience is very vast in the process of rationalizing all of these, because as the gentleman mentioned, I was told that there's also a barangay in General Santos which has 200,000 people. Aside from the one mentioned, I think there's one barangay in Caloocan which has about 180,000 people. So, which are bigger than all my towns in the province of Aurora. So, in fact, almost as big as the province already.
And Mr. President, for example,
Senator Gordon,
500, thank you, Mr. President, I'm sorry. 500,000, for example, at Holy Spirit, Quezon City, that's a barangay, Mr. President. Not to mention
Yes.
Payatas, not to mention Commonwealth. These are some of the biggest barangays in the country.
Tatalon.
And for that
And
matter,
Baitoro.
Caloocan. The other half of Caloocan is a barangay, which is extremely large, Mr. President. And yet, it leads to other ridiculous consequences. For example, in the case of cities, cities are being made left and right, and yet it has become the bane of contention, or the bone of contention, and the bane for the finance department to allocate ERA, because it becomes very difficult to reallocate when some are indeed bigger and yet they're not even classified as cities. That's correct. Or Negros. Actually, Negros has so many cities, and that's why it created a lot of furor in the Supreme Court on the creation of cities. I think it's about time, and I think the gentleman from Aurora should be commended, because really, it's about time that we start reviewing some of these laws that require an oversight every 5 years, so we can rationalize all these laws, and we will not come to a ridiculous extreme, Mr. President, that creates a lot of unjust apportionments in terms of resources and in terms of districting, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, gentleman from Zambales.
Mr. President, so thank you for that. I do agree. Now, my question earlier was on the, shall we say, macro level. Let me go to the micro level, which I'm trying to avoid if there are going to be many local bills coming to the Senate with this type of legislation. Why are they creating a barangay? And where are they cutting it from?
Mr. President, the Barangay Kumawas is already an existing barangay. It was created through Provincial Ordinance number 103-94 of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan of the Province of Surigao del Sur. It was approved by a majority of votes cast via plebiscite in 1996. So now they just want to formalize it through legislation. I think it's for the receipt of ERA, of Internal Revenue Allotment. Because when it was created under provincial ordinance, its support or its supporting funding was also through appropriations of the provincial government. So now I think
Existing na ito.
perhaps they are feeling the burden, and perhaps they would like the assistance of the national government. So it's just formalizing actually an existing barangay. And the difference being that if it's created by law, it will get funding from the national government. It will get its share of the national taxes or the ERA, Mr. President.
I see. And would you know the meaning of kumawas? Ano ba ito? Is this a person? Is this a word?
My staff are giving me a blank look, Mr. President. I wish I could reflect it to you, but
They're not.
it's registering a blank at the moment.
Anyway, never mind. I withdraw the question, Mr. President.
My apologies, Mr. President. We can find out, I think, if we ask Congressman Pimentel, who is the
all right.
sponsor in the House.
It's all right, Mr. President. I will no longer push through with that. I would like to terminate my interpellation on the subject, Mr. President, and I'm glad that the Committee on Local Government of the Senate will look into this matter so that we can perhaps make a very good review on the local government code. So with that, I move to close the period of interpellation on House Bill 4682, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Do you have any committee amendments, Mr. President?
No committee or individual amendments.
There are no committee on individual
President,
amendments. I move to close the period of committee on individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none.
With the permission of the chamber, I move to approve on second reading House Bill 4682 under committee report number 48.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I thank the chamber, the majority leader, and the minority leader for helping facilitate the passage of this measure. Thank you. Can I get back this código? Because that still applies for the nabotas.
Mr. President, last March 8, Senator Trillanes delivered a speech together with Senator Pacquiao also, the subject matter of which we have already discussed beforehand. So it was referred to the Committee on Rules. The Committee on Rules now would like to move that these speeches be transmitted to the archives, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you, Mr. President. After getting the concurrence of the concerned chairs and the author of the bill, I move that we transfer the primary referral of Senate Bill 1375 from the Committee on Civil Service to the Committee on Public Services. The secondary referral shall be the Civil Service and the Finance Committees, Mr. President.
The minority floor leader is recognized.
Just a request, Mr. President. In instances such as this, may we request the majority leader to please read the short title of the measure rather than just the number. And this is principally because we would want to find out whether or not this is within the jurisdiction of the committees that they are being transferred to. We submit, Mr. President, that the referral should be based on the jurisdiction defined in our rules rather than the consent of our colleagues, the author and the colleague where, and the senator or the committee where it is being transferred. So those two things, Mr. President. Number one, that the title of the measure be read into the record when we are making these proposals. And number two, that a ruling from the majority leader acting in behalf of the Rules Committee that indeed the transfer is proper because the jurisdiction falls in the committee to which the bill is being transferred.
We take note of the manifestation of the minority leader. As a matter of fact, we concur. Now we read the title of Senate Bill 1375. It's an act creating a National Transportation Safety Board, appropriating funds therefore and other purposes. I wonder why it was really referred to the Committee on Civil Service in the first place. It should have really been to the Committee on Public Services. So we so move that it be referred primarily to the Committee on Public Services and then Civil Service and Finance.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would like to manifest that Senator Francis Pangilinan has been designated by the Chair of the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation and Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on the Automated Election System as Vice Chairman of the said committees.
The chair takes note.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, March 14, 2017.
Before we adjourn, just a point of
Senator Gordon
inquiry.
is recognized.
I am designated as Vice Chairman of the Committee on Electoral Reforms and principal author of the Automated Election Law. So, Chairman is Leila de Lima, and I'm already scheduling hearings on electoral reforms, Mr. President. So I was wondering how it is that suddenly there will be another vice chair. So it's a very small committee. I'm ready to start taking. In fact, I was just talking with my staff that we should schedule the hearings because including campaign finance reforms, political party switching, all that is being prepared. These have been stranded. These are authored by me and the elder Angara, Mr. President. I don't know if he's the better, but anyway. These are things that we want to take up with urgency.
Well, we thank the gentleman for calling our attention, but the only reason is that because we received a letter from the Chief of Staff of Senator De Lima naming Senator Pangilinan as Vice Chairperson, but we see the point of the gentleman, so I move that the earlier motion be referred to the Committee on Rules for further review, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you. Mr. President, motion to adjourn to call the previous question.
Is there any objection? Hearing none. The session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, 14 March 2017.